Good evening, everyone. My name is Donnie Williams. I'm here this evening to discuss my key takeaways from my Christian tradition paper, focus on looking at the history and traditions of the Baptist faith that includes the national and worldwide impact this faith had on the secular and religious world. It is interesting to note two individuals, John Clarke and Roger Williams, from the 1630s, who had similar ideas. They were both Christian Baptist ministers who believed in the separation of church and state. They began to get a little flustered about and frustrated about the church's involvement in more political theater than the gospel of Jesus Christ. And they sought out to perpetuate legislation that protected the religious freedoms under the First Amendment of the United States Constitution. And they were pretty successful. They were inspiring ministers of the Baptist faith who accomplished some legislative goals in substantially protecting the religious liberties under the First Amendment of the United States Constitution. They were not only always just being ministers of spiritual administration of the sacraments, which they believed in, which was dedicating babies, performing baptisms, but they were also instrumental in pushing forth legislation and effectuating change in the secular environment. Certainly, there was another individual that was worth mentioning. His name was Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., which came at a later period of time, but also was a Baptist Christian minister who sought out to effectuate change in the civil rights era, protecting the workers' union rights and civil rights of people of color in America. Certainly, many of the principles that Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. upheld and the two ministers mentioned earlier from the 1630s, Mr. John Clarke and Roger Williams, were all rooted in the gospel, in that they wanted to protect and preserve our freedom to represent the gospel independent of the government. And I believe that's crucially important in the world that we live in today that needs to hear a word. The world needs a word. We can tell by what's going on in the political landscape that the world needs a word. And we should allow ourselves as the church to influence the world rather than to allow ourselves to be influenced as a church by the world. We want to be able to be heard because the gospel is the saving grace for all humanity. And I believe that we need to be able to speak up in the words of Jesus. I am in the world, but not of it. And so it is important for us as Christians to have a voice and to be heard, like Mr. John Clarke and Roger Williams, as well as Dr. Martin Luther King and many others have done in standing up for the gospel of Jesus Christ and for perpetuating change in a world that needs a word. Thank you for listening to these key takeaways that I presented this evening on my Christian tradition paper. I can't wait to hear and see some of your takeaways as well. Until then, I encourage you to be blessed and may God keep you. Be well.